What if the Buddha never existed? Siddhartha Gautama. What if he's a made-up character? Would that matter to Buddhism? There are Buddhists who will say, you know what? Buddha existed. We've got this material. It's all here. I don't even want to hear about it. There are scholars, however, that say, there's not only is there not evidence, but what there really is evidence of something happening that is a repeating motif from antiquity that makes it so that the Buddhist teaching, even though it sounds unique, is not at the deepest level. Buddhism is a psychological practice. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. The Buddha basically teaches from the Dhammapada that we become products of our experiences, our thinking. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It's founded on thought. It's based in thought. So if you think back on your own life, you see that you came here as pretty much an empty package, but then became a psychological product of your experiences and the judgments, the learning, all of the things that we have up in our brain. That is our self-identity. That is what we live through. And that is a mental concept of belief. Buddha teaches to go through and weed through that stuff. The pain, watch it come, watch it go. Pain follows like the wheel follows. That's a cyclical pain. The foot of the ox that draws the carriage. We become the ox that draws the carriage. That represents us through life. And having something derogatory up here means that something is going to cyclically continue to happen. That's a psychological teaching that we don't need to worship the Buddha. And you don't anyway. Buddhism is not about worshiping the teacher. It's about following the teacher. All right. So what I want to do is point out a common motif between the Buddha, but then later on, we're going to find 500 years later that the Romans copied that same template to create Jesus. Let's take a look at this. Okay, there's more to this story than meets the eye. I'm not going to go through them extensively. I'm just going to point out a couple of things where the alignment of the story motifs is so good that you can see the parallels here. Now, I've put a note up here, and I believe this. Myth and religions are framed on one single template. Watch for the common motifs or repeating between the Buddha and Jesus Christ, which signify the start of the inward journey. This is a healing path. These are both cryptic in the same style of mental shifting of analogous verbiage. However, they sound different if you don't see the nested concept. These are all mental and will be managed as a mental step that needs to be interpreted. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is what is that shifting verbiage, analogous verbiage thing I'm talking about? Okay, they're teaching something here, but they're nesting it cryptically. I have to heal myself. I'm hanging on to something and it's cycling in pain and it just hurts. It hurts. I can't. My life sucks because of something that happened that I can't get resolved. So you want to pass that around, that you have to let go of that. You've got to heal. The population is not going to generally carry something like that. No, that pisses me off. I'm so angry about that, I'm never going to do it. So you want that message to go around, though, so that the people who do have the capacity to interact with it and tell themselves, you know what, I want to resolve this stuff, that they've got information available. So instead of passing it around in plain language, you would nest it in cryptic verbiage, like an anchored ship cannot sail. You have to know that represents you. I'm the ship. That's an analog for me. And anchoring is an analog for holding on to something. So I got two analogous terms that I am. I'm a ship hanging on to something. I am a human being that won't let go of an issue, and I cannot sail as a result. You can turn around and say, well, I don't like the sounds of that one. My culture's not going to do that. What do we have over here? Oh, how about the dog tied in the yard cannot escape? Now you're the dog in the yard that cannot escape. The concepts are always there. Something is attached to something and can't get away. However, the way it's carried can float all over the place. Tetherball. The Buddha leaves all behind. I'm just jumping to this point here. There's a bit of a story where he came from a rich home and he saw and learned. We're just going to skip that and jump to this point right here where he's ready to go on the adventure. The Buddha leaves all behind and crosses the threshold. It's a metaphorical threshold, and enters the space under the Bodhi tree. While there, he fasts and meditates until he has found his inner preparedness. He is tempted by Mara, but resists the temptation of sin. He gathers his monks, teaches them, and begins his travels to teach. 500 years later, Jesus leaves all behind and crosses the threshold of a baptism by John and enters the wilderness for 40 days. So you see he's crossing a threshold, you're going through a water crossing, and then you're going into the wilderness for a period of time. In the same way, the Buddha left all behind and went under the Bodhi tree. Here's another one that should crack things open a little bit. How about the story of Exodus? What happened here? Jesus just got baptized and then spent 40 days in the wilderness. The Israelites crossed the Red Sea and spent 40 years in the desert. This is a repeating motif. There's a way that these stories are used, but we can see that story, the Exodus story, that's older than the Buddha. Jesus fasts and prays until he has found his inner preparedness. He is tempted by Satan, but resists the temptation of sin. He gathers his disciples, teaches them, and begins his ministry to teach. So we see that up here. The both of them, number one, they went into a space to be alone, a quiet space to be alone. They both fast, meditate, pray, whatever, until they're ready to go. Then both of them are tempted by sin, Mara, Satan. Both of them, at that, after resisting the temptation, they gather their monks or their disciples and they begin their ministry. That is a common repeating motif. Okay, the way that story works is it's psychological. It plays out in the mind. At any time you follow one of these templates, the template is based on a human life, the sequences of human life. Therefore, if you're turning inward and going to go heal that stuff, at that moment you're becoming the Buddha that it's going into the wilderness, or Jesus that is, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, Jesus in the wilderness. I see how easy they blend. But those represent your mind. This is what is up here. I've got to stop looking outward, stop freaking out, sit down, go meditate, look up here, stop consuming from the world. Fasting and meditating, praying, that's looking at the issues that I have to resolve and get away from it. What do you have? Something in the past, maybe something happening now, drugs, alcohol, something that you're trying to get rid of. You're in the wilderness, you're up in your mind fighting it. Do you give in or not? Do you succeed or not? This is a psychological path for healing. Mental health. You have to resist that temptation to move on. Then you gather up. It's all happening up in your mind. So the disciples, the Argonauts, the monks, the Israelites, and in any case, when you're gathering up your heroes to go with, they all have names that represent something that is a part of your inner qualities. Your balance, sense of fairness, your knowledge of what is right and wrong, strength of courage. There's, all of them represent qualities up here. And then what you're going to do on that adventure, you're not going out there to heal, you're going up here to heal. What is in the mind? That's what these stories are teaching, and that's how that part works right there. That represents us on a path inward for healing and trying to resist the temptation. We're going to see other things in here like, karma. Christians don't like this one. I had talked to somebody the other day and said, why are you trying to talk about things logically or being really solid and being real when you use terms like karma? You know what karma means? It's 2,500-year-old version of cause and effect. Karma is cause and effect. Jesus, the measure you mete unto others will be meted back. Cause and effect. All of these are through mental judgments. The Buddha tells you to seek emptiness. Jesus tells you, blessed are the poor in spirit. Both of them mean to resolve that pile of mental judgments we're continually living through them, cycling in pain as it puts on a new face, new character, new person. It is known by Jesus, that bundle of stuff, it can be called the mote in the eye, the odd against your brother, the old wine we cannot put into new wineskins, and much more so. Do you see right there that 500 years later, we know that Jesus did not exist, although in the same way you would have Christians that are dependent upon that happening, but they're dependent upon their psychology requires them to feel good if they just worship the teacher. They don't follow the teachings. They don't understand what Jesus teaches. But if you look between the two, you're seeing, wait, that's the same character. But you know what? If you look elsewhere, Lao Tzu, that same character appears elsewhere, not just in Buddhism and not just in Christianity. Jesus, however, if you follow his path, you stop being a Christian. In the case of Buddha, if you follow his path, you become a Buddhist. But a Buddhist is not a worshiper of the Buddha. They are somebody who follows his path. The Buddha tells you you're a product of your thinking. Resolve it for a better life. Lao Tzu teaches us you're a product of your thinking. Let things go in order to have a better flow in the Tao, a better life. Jesus tells you to resolve the odd against your brother, then come and leave a gift so your Father who sees in secret rewards you in secret. In all cases, if you do that mentally, you let that stuff go, you're going to have a better flow in the Tao, you're going to come closer to nirvana, and you're going to become closer to finding the kingdom of heaven within. All right, all of them are going to be the same conceptual place. However, in the packaging, they're carried in such a way that if you just worship Jesus, you're going to go to heaven. What does that do? That makes everybody just worship Jesus until they die. They're not going to interact with his teachings. But what I see here is a common motif that tells me, no, the Buddha did not exist, nor did Jesus exist. However, that body of work exists, and that is what we're supposed to be after. Not worshiping teachers, but understanding what they taught. Do we get there? I don't think we do. Questions, comments? I'd love to hear it below. See you in the next video.